Hello again, friends. Welcome back to Spooky Month and the next installment of The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. For the last 2 weeks, we have learned about the creepy town of Dunwich, which apparently has just always been creepy, making me wonder why anyone moved there in the first place. And we learned about Wilbur Whateley, a very tall, very scary dude. Something weird is going on at the Whateley farm. Let's find out what, as we continue with The Dunwich Horror. The following winter brought an event no less strange than Wilbur's first trip outside the Dunwich region. Correspondence with the Widner Library at Harvard, the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, the British Museum, the University of Buenos Aires, and the Library of Miskatonic University in Arkham had failed to get him the loan of a book he desperately wanted. So, at length, he set out in person. Shabby, dirty, bearded, and uncouth of dialect, to consult the copy at Miskatonic, which was the nearest to him geographically. Almost 8 feet tall, carrying a cheap new valise from Osborne's general store. This dark, goatish gargoyle appeared one day in Arkham.
Can you imagine you're just a random student going along and then suddenly there's this 8-foot tall there's this 8-foot tall monster that just appears?
Lurch?
I don't think Lurch is 8 feet tall.
I guess they're fielding a new basketball team in Arkham. In quest of the dreaded volume kept under lock and key at the college library. The hideous Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul Alzred in Olaus Wormius's Latin version as printed in Spain in the 17th century. He had never seen a city before, and had no thought save to find his way to the university grounds, where indeed he passed heedlessly by the great white-fanged watchdog that barked with unnatural fury and enmity, and tugged frantically at its stout chain. Wilbur had with him the priceless but imperfect copy of Dr. Dee's English version, which his grandfather had bequeathed him, and upon receiving access to the Latin copy, he at once begged to collate the 2 texts with the aim of discovering a certain passage which would have come on the 751st page of his own defective volume. This much he could not civilly refrain from telling the librarian, the same erudite Harry Armitage, alma mater Miskatonic, Doctor of Philosophy Princeton, literary doctorate Johns Hopkins, who had once called at the farm, and who now, politely, plied him with questions. He was looking, he had to admit, for a kind of formula or incantation containing the frightful name Yog-Sothoth. And it puzzled him to find discrepancies, duplications, and ambiguities which made the matter of determination far from easy.
Klaatu! Barata! Necktie, nectar, nickel.
As he copied the formula he finally chose, Dr. Armitage looked involuntarily over his shoulder at the open pages, the left-hand one of which, in the Latin version, contained such monstrous threats to peace and sanity of the world. Nor is it to be thought, ran the text as Armitage mentally translated it, that man is either the oldest or the last of earth's masters, or that the common bulk of life, the substance, walks alone. The old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones shall be. Not the spaces we know, but between them. They walk serene and primal, undimensional, and to us unseen. Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and guardian of the gate. Past, present, future are all one in Yog-Sothoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old, and where they shall break through again. He knows where they have trod earth's fields, and where they still trod them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. By their smell can men sometimes know them near, but of their semblance can no man know, saving only in the features of those they have begotten on mankind, and of those are the many sorts differing in likeness, from man's truest eidolon to the shape without sight or substance, which is them. They walk unseen and foul in the lonely places where the words have been spoken, and the rites howled through at their seasons. The wind gibbers with their voices, and the earth mutters with their consciousness. They bend the forest and crush the city, yet may not forest or city behold the hand that smites. Cadath in the cold waste hath known them, and what man knows Cadath? The ice desert of the south and the sunken islands of the ocean hold stones, whereon their seal is engraven. But who hath seen the deep frozen city, or the sealed tower long garlanded with seaweed and barnacles? Great Cthulu is their cousin, yet can he spy them only dimly. La Shub-Niggurath, as a foulness shall ye know them, their hand is at your throats, yet ye see them not, and their habitation is even one with your guarded threshold. Yog-Sothoth is the key to the gate whereby the spheres meet. Man rules now where they ruled once. They shall rule where man rules now. After summer is winter, and after winter summer. They wait, patient and potent, and here shall they reign again.
Wait, so they're an even bigger threat than Cthulhu?
Well, no, they're cousins to Cthulhu. They're like family.
Yet he can spy them only dimly.
Maybe he's, needs glasses. Dr. Armitage, associating what he was reading with what he had heard of Dunwich and its brooding presences, and of Wilbur Whateley and his dim, hideous aura that stretched from a dubious birth to a cloud of probable matricide, felt a wave of fright as tangible as a draught of the tomb's cold clamminess.
Oh God, this demon's gonna send more demons!
The bent, goatish giant before him seemed like the spawn of another planet or dimension, like seemingly only partly of mankind, and linked to black gulfs of essence and entity that stretched like Titan phantasms beyond all spheres of force and matter, space and time. Presently Wilbur raised his head and began speaking in that strange, resonant fashion which hinted at self-producing organs unlike the run of mankind's. Oh yeah, because not only is he a weird giant, he's a squid in a person suit. I forgot. Mr. Armitage,
Perfect,
he said, I calculate I've got to take that book home. These things in it I got to try under certain conditions that I can't get here, and it'd be a mortal sin to let a red tape rule hold me up. Let me take it along, sir, and I swear they won't nobody know the difference. I don't need to tell you. I'll take good care of it. It wa'n't me that put this dear copy in the shape it is. He stopped as he saw firm denial on the librarian's face, and his own goatish features grew crafty. Armitage, half ready to tell him he might make a copy of what parts he needed, thought suddenly of the possible consequences and checked himself. There was too much responsibility in giving such a being a key to such blasphemous outer spheres. Whateley saw how things stood and tried to answer lightly. Well, all right. If you feel that way about it, maybe Harvard won't be so fussy as you be. And without saying more, he rose and strode out of the building, stooping at each doorway. Armitage heard the savage yelping of the great watchdog, and studied Whateley's gorilla-like lope as he crossed the bit of campus visible from the window. He thought of the wild tales he had heard, and recalled the old Sunday stories in the Advertiser. These things, and the lore he had picked up from Dunwich rustics and villagers during his one visit there, unseen things, not of the earth. Or, at least, not of tri-dimensional earth, rushed, foetid and horrible, through New England's glens, and brooded obscenely on the mountain tops. Of this he had long felt certain. Now he seemed to sense the close presence of some terrible part of the intruding horror, and to glimpse a hellish advance in the black domination of the Ancient One, passive nightmare. He locked away the Necronomicon with a shudder of disgust, but the room still reeked with an unholy and unidentifiable stench. "As of foulness shall ye know them," he quoted. Yes, the odor was the same as that which had sickened him at the Whateley farmhouse less than 3 years before. He thought of Wilbur, goatish and ominous, once again, and laughed mockingly at the village rumors of his parentage. "Inbreeding," Armitage muttered half aloud to himself. "Great God, what simpletons! Shew them Arthur Matchen's great god Pan, and they'll think it a common Dunwich scandal. But what a thing! What cursed shapeless influence on or off this three-dimensioned earth was Wilbur Whateley's father. Born on Candlemas, 9 months after May Eve of 1912, when the talk about the queer earth noises reached clear to Arkham. What walked on the mountains that May night, when rude Miss Horror fastened itself on the world in half-human flesh and blood? During the ensuing weeks, Dr. Armitage set about to collect all possible data on Wilbur Whateley and the formless presence around Dunwich. He got in communication with Dr. Houghton of Aylesbury, who had attended old Whateley in his last illness, and found much to ponder over the grandfather's last words as quoted by the physician. As a visit to Dunwich village failed to bring out much that was new, but a close survey of the Necronomicon in those parts which Wilbur had sought so avidly seemed to supply new and terrible clues to the nature, methods, and desires of the strange evil so vaguely threatening this planet. Talks with several students of archaic lore in Boston, and letters to many others elsewhere gave him a growing amazement, which passed slowly through varied degrees of alarm to a state of really acute spiritual fear. As the summer drew on, he felt dimly that something ought to be done about the lurking terrors of the upper Miskatonic Valley, and about the monstrous being known to the human world as Wilbur Whateley. The Dunwich Horror itself came between Lammas and the equinox in 1928, and Dr. Armitage was among those who witnessed its monstrous prologue. He had heard, meanwhile, of Whateley's grotesque trip to Cambridge, and of his frantic efforts to borrow or copy the Necronomicon at the Widner Library. Those efforts had been in vain, since Armitage had issued warnings of the keenest intensity to all librarians having charge of the dreaded volume. Wilbur had been shockingly nervous at Cambridge, anxious for the book, yet almost equally anxious to get home again, as he feared the results of being away too long. Early in August, the half-expected outcome developed, and in the small hours of the 3D, Dr. Armitage was awakened suddenly by wild, fierce cries of the savage watchdog on the college campus. Deep and terrible, the snarling, half-mad growls and barks continued, always in mounting volume, but with hideously significant pauses. Then there rang out a scream from a wholly different throat, such a scream as roused half the sleepers of Arkham, and haunted their dreams ever afterwards, and such a scream as could come from no being born of earth, or wholly of earth. Armitage hastened into some clothing, and rushing across the street and lawn to the college buildings, saw that the others were ahead of him, and heard the echoes of a burglar alarm still shrilling from the library. An open window shooed back and gaping in the moonlight. What had come had indeed completed its entrance, for the barking and the screaming, now fast fading into a mixed low growling and moaning, proceeded unmistakably from within. Some instinct warned Armitage that what was taking place was not a thing for unfortified eyes to see, so he brushed back the crowd with authority as he unlocked the vestibule door. Among the others he saw Professor Warren Rice and Dr. Francis Morgan, men to whom he had told some of his conjectures and misgivings, and these two he motioned to accompany him inside. The inward sounds, except for a watchful droning from the dog, had by this time quite subsided, but Armitage now perceived, with a sudden start, that a loud chorus of whippoorwills among the shrubbery had commenced, a damnably rhythmical piping, as if in unison with the last breaths of a dying man. The building was full of a frightful stench, which Dr. Armitage knew too well, and the three men rushed across the hall to the small genealogical reading room, whence the low whining came. For a second, nobody dared to turn on the light. Then Armitage summoned his courage and snapped the switch. One of the three, it is not certain which, shrieked aloud at what sprawled before them among disordered tables and overturned chairs. Professor Rice declares that he wholly lost consciousness for an instant, though he did not stumble or fall. The thing that lay half bent on its side in a footed pool of greenish-yellow ichor and tarry stickiness was almost 9 feet tall, and the dog had torn off all the clothing and some of the skin. It was not quite dead, but twitched silently and spasmodically, while its chest heaved in monstrous unison with the mad piping of the expectant whippoorwills outside. Bits of shoe leather and fragments of apparel were scattered about the room, and just inside the window was an empty canvas sack, lay where it had evidently been thrown. Near the central desk a revolver had fallen, a dented but undischarged cartridge later explaining why it had not been fired. The thing itself, however, crowded out all other images at the time. It would be trite and not wholly accurate to say that no human pen could describe it, but one may properly say that it could not be vividly visualized by anyone whose ideas of aspect and contour are too closely bound up with the common life forms of this planet and the 3 known dimensions. It was partly human, beyond a doubt, with very man-like hands and head, and the goatish, chinless face had the stamp of the Whateleys upon it. But the torso and lower parts of the body were teratologically fabulous, so that only generous clothing could ever have enabled it to walk on earth unchallenged or uneradicated. Above the waist it was semi-anthropomorphic, though its chest, where the dog's rending paws still rested watchfully,
She's a good dog.
had the leathery, reticuled hide of a crocodile or alligator. The back was piebald, with yellow and black, and dimly suggested the squamous covering of certain snakes. Below the waist, though, it was the worst, for here all human resemblance left off, and sheer fantasy began. The skin was thickly covered with coarse black fur. From the abdomen a score of long greenish-gray tentacles with red-sucking mouths protruded limply. Their arrangement was odd, and seemed to follow the symmetries of some cosmic geometry unknown to Earth or the solar systems. Each of the hips deep set in a kind of pinkish, stellated orbit, which was what seemed to be a rudimentary eye, whilst in lieu of a tail there depended a kind of trunk or feeler with purple annular markings. and with evidences of being underdeveloped mouth or throat. The limbs, save for their black fur, roughly resembled the hind legs of prehistoric Earth's giant saurians, and terminated in riddy-veined pads that were neither hooves nor claws. When the thing breathed, its tail and tentacles rhythmically changed color, as if from some circular cause normal to non-human side of its ancestry. In the tentacles it was observed as a deepening and the greenish tinge, whilst in the tail it was manifest as a yellowish appearance, which alternated with a sickly greenish-white in the spaces between the purple rings. Of genuine blood, there was none. Only the fetid greenish-yellow ichor which trickled along the painted floor beyond the radius of the stickiness and left a curious discoloration behind it. As the presence of the three men seemed to rouse the dying thing, it began to mumble, without turning or raising its head. Dr. Armitage made no written record of its mouthing, but asserts confidently that nothing in English was uttered. At first, the syllables defied all correlation with any speech of earth, but toward the last there came some disjointed fragments, evidently taken from the Necronomicon, that monstrous blasphemy in quest of which the thing had perished. These fragments, as Armitage recalls them, ran something like Naga, Nagagah, Bug Shaag, Yahag, Yog Sa'oth, Yog Sa'oth. Phew! Nothing happened. That's good. I was afraid that... Ah! Oh. You're funny. They trailed off into nothingness as the whippoorwills shrieked in rhythmical crescendos of unholy anticipation. Then came a halt in the gasping, and the dog raised its head in a long, lugubrious howl. A change came over the yellow, goatish face of the prostrate thing, and the great black eyes fell in appallingly. Outside the window the shrilling whippoorwills had suddenly ceased, and above the murmurs of the gathering crowd there came the sound of a panic-struck whirring and fluttering. Against the moon, vast clouds of feathery watchers rose and raced from sight, frantic at that which they sought for prey.
But God, the spirits turned against them!
All at once the dog started up abruptly, gave a frightful bark, and leaped nervously out of the window by which it had entered. A cry rose from the crowd, and Dr. Armitage shouted to the men outside that no one must be admitted till the police or medical examiner came. He was thankful that the windows were just too high to permit of peering in, and drew the dark curtains carefully down over each one. By this time 2 policemen had arrived, and Dr. Morgan, meeting them in the vestibule, was urging them for their own sakes to postpone entrance to the stench-filled reading room till the examiner came and the prostrate thing could be covered up. Meanwhile, frightful changes were taking place on the floor. One need not describe the kind and rate of shrinkage and disintegration that occurred before the eyes of Dr. Armitage and Professor Rice. But it is permissible to say that, aside from the external appearance of face and hands, the really human element in Wilbur Whateley's must have been very small. When the medical examiner came, there was only a sticky, whitish mass on the painted boards, and the monstrous odor had nearly disappeared. Apparently Whateley had had no skull or bony skeleton, at least in any true or stable sense. He had taken somewhat after his unknown father. So he was a son of a squid? I don't know. That was weird and creepy, and I guess I'm really glad that I didn't accidentally summon Yogg-Sothoth. No, back, stay. Well, I guess we come to the point of the story where I ask you to like, share, and subscribe to, make the algorithm happy, and, I don't know, maybe introduce us to some new friends, and I feel weird, like
Artie.
something odd has happened to me.
Artie,
Yes?
you,
What? Is my hair out of place?
No, you're fine now. Continue going.
That's weird. I would like to thank Pixabay.com and its contributors for all the wonderful music and images and sounds and videos and all of that can be found there. It really is the most wonderful website. I also have a Patreon page if you'd like to support me, and, Instagram and Facebook too when I remember they're there. But most of all, I'd like to thank you, my dear friends, for being here during all this silliness and continuing with us on this long and spooky story. And now, for a special thank you to my Patreon friends.